The Midday Report
with Mandy Wiener.
12 to 1 on 702.
702.
NDPB, thank you very much for making the time to speak to us today. You are actually closer to the end of your term than you are to the beginning now, if you think about it, considering you've been in the job for almost 4 years. Mm-hmm. When you came in, you described it like a house on fire. How would you describe it now?
We've certainly doused the fire, and the house is being rebuilt. And how far up we've gone, we've certainly put the foundations down, really strong foundations, and that was a really important part of rebuilding. And that was the challenge when I first took office, is that the expectations were unrealistically high, understandably so when one thinks about what has happened in the past 10 years. So, you can't just put a national director and change nothing else and expect that cases are going to be rolling through and asset recovery, asset forfeiture orders are going to be coming through. So, we've been really hard at work rebuilding the institution. And you'll notice from our annual report, the latest one, it says reaching solid ground.
Yes.
So extremely shaky start. And you can't build on a shaky, a solid house on a shaky foundation. So there's been a lot of back office work happening to build that foundation, like getting the strong leadership, a whole lot of policies, processes, and various aspects of trying to build what we call the IPAC organization, one that's independent, professional, accountable, hugely important, and ultimately credible, one that the public believes in. So, I'm really pleased to say we're not where we want to be, but we're really far from where we started. And I'm really pleased with the progress we've made in terms of trying to rebuild this house.
Give me a sense of what the first few years were like. How would you make the public understand just how bad things were? We know the NPA was a key site of state capture, but how bad was it?
The key challenges when I took office were, firstly, a completely lack of top leadership, ethical leadership. So internally, there were huge challenges because the office was very factionalized, and because of what had happened. There was no budget, very little budget. I should say no budget for the important work that needed to happen. And so staff morale was at an all-time low for various reasons, including what had happened in the NPA, lack of their confidence of the staff in the leadership, no lack of credibility of an institution. And so, they were, the morale was extremely low. There had not been recruitment for about 4 or 5 years before I started. The vacancy rate was sitting at between 25 and 30%. And a large proportion of that in the key parts of the NPAs that would be at the forefront of fighting corruption, which is the Specialized Commercial Crime Unit as well as the Asset Forfeiture Unit. And so, when you're trying to build an institution with very low morale, with hardly any resources that you need, insufficient resources, and a weak leadership, putting a national director without the other key positions below that, it's very difficult to change much. So, we had directors of public prosecutions, really important. The DPPs are hugely important in the divisions because they take decisions to prosecute. And there were a number of acting appointments in that space. And so just trying to deal with all internal, and that's just internally. And then if you look at externally, you're dealing with entities that had not escaped state capture, like the DPCI, and the police are a key stakeholder in terms of trying to deal with crime. So the DPCI had its own challenges, and we were trying to build, regrettably, I think there was collaboration for the wrong reasons between certain government departments. When you look at SARS, you look at the NPA, you look at the DPCI. Now we needed to ensure that we were collaborating for the right reasons and that we were enhancing those,
Right.
the collaboration. And so those were just, challenges that we had to deal with them internally and externally. So, hopefully that gives a sense of what we were trying to do. And the leadership really, I mean, it's only the full DNDPP layer, which is one below the national director, was only, I mean, the last one was Anton Duplessis, who was appointed in March last year. And the two before that, which is Rodney de Kock as well as Omar Rabaji Rasataba, they were appointed June before that. So about 2 years and a bit. So, about 18 months after I took office, I still didn't have my key leadership in place. So, and so when one looks at that, if we're close to 4 years, but that's really 2.5 years with that leadership sort of more or less in place. And once they came on board, they needed to understand the landscape to, when you really think about it, it's about 2 years since the NPA really was able to start, working collaboratively at the senior leadership levels in order to properly guide the organization.
So, some of the state-owned entities that were hit hard by state capture, you'll hear underage raters say that there is still sabotage, that there is still the remnants of state capture. Do you feel that the NPA is still factionalized in any way? Do you feel that there are still remnants of state capture, or do you feel that it is now a unified organization?
I don't think it's factionalized anymore. I think even during state capture, one of the strengths of the NPA is your rank and file prosecutors just wanted to serve the victims and survivors of crime and to bring justice. And it was really at the senior leadership levels where they seem to have lost the plot. So when I took office, you still had a groundswell of prosecutors in the NPA who wanted to take the NPA back to being that organization that they were proud of. And I worked in the NPA now about 15 years ago before I left, and I was very proud of what we were doing. And so, that they were, so it was not very difficult to actually bring the good people in the NPA because they're the majority. And so we're certainly not factionalized anymore. But there are certainly, we are dealing with certain staff members that have been compromised. It has taken longer than we would have hoped, but these processes do take time. But, we've been engaging with the relevant staff members. It has to be, I've always said, a fair process. And so, hopefully those processes will be finalized now in the not too distant future. And then, we'll be able to say, look, the NPA is now an institution that has dealt with all of these issues, because whatever the outcome of these disciplinary processes are, we must respect and we must move on. But this is certainly not holding back the institution.
I know that Open Secrets has been critical of you for not moving on some of those who were implicated, saying that you're not acting against them. What is your response to that?
Well, firstly, I think that, it's constructive criticism is really important for the NPA. We have said this all along. I mean, accountability is one of our key pillars. And so we welcome, constructive criticism that helps us grow, become a better organization. And we listen to civil society. We've even started civil society roundtables. I hope we have another one fairly soon so we can engage with civil society that we regard as a really important stakeholder. But really, criticism that seems to be driven by certain agendas, either professional or personal, does not serve the interests of the rule of law. And I think that in that regard, I don't even know whether I should dignify that with a response. But we are doing what we need to do. And I think that the recent work of the NPA, particularly in the last 6 months since Advocate Johnson has taken over in the ID, I think has been quite phenomenal. So,
was appointing Advocate Cronje a mistake?
I don't think it was a mistake. I've always said that I had no doubt about Advocate Cronier's commitment to making a difference. So, but I think this is a tricky question. I think it's let me say this, that in trying to build an institution like the ID, one needed someone that had extremely good leadership skills, someone that could collaborate very, very well with stakeholders, because the regret is, sadly, I mean, the legal framework of the ID is such that it is premised on being resourced from other government institutions, as well as from the private sector as necessary. But that means you've got to be able to collaborate very closely with stakeholders. So it was a very complicated and complex environment. And it needed to be very carefully, you needed to move through this with very certain types of skills that actually enabled one to collaborate for success. And so I think, a fair amount of work had been done. The challenges were huge because of the resourcing issues predominantly, which I mentioned, and they haven't gone away. The challenges that were with the ID are still the challenges that we face because of a weak legal framework and the need to rely on, externally for certain types of skills. But I think it's the way you approach these challenges, with a problem-solving attitude, with the attitude to collaboration, that makes a really big difference. And, that's what Andrea Johnson has brought into the mix. And also, bringing the team together. A lot of staff members were actually working from various, remotely. They've all back now. We've got, the building for the ID. And so, just getting teams together, team cohesion is extremely important. And Advocate Johnson's been working very hard on that. And so, they say success begets success as well. So I think there's a good mood in the team to really move to, it's only the start, let's put it that way.
So we've seen a lot of action over the past few months. I think that you really have acted on these seminal cases that the ID has gone after. Is that for you, in a way, kind of, how should I put it? Is this the coming together of what you've envisaged over the past few years, just in terms of now finally seeing the state capture implicated actually appearing in the dock?
Of course, it's the coming together of what the mandate of the NPA is to ensure accountability, is to prosecute people that are perpetrators of crime. But of course, the pressure on the NPA right from day one when I took office was to ensure that the perpetrators of state capture are held accountable. And as a national director and as firstly a citizen of this country, that is hugely important for me as a citizen, like the millions of South Africans who want to see justice. We all know what state capture has done in our country. And the important thing is that the poor and the vulnerable have suffered the most as a result of state capture, because of the fact that money destined for uplifting, the poor with regard to sanitation, water, basic infrastructure, all of that has been stolen. Recently there's another big scam with the National Lottery. It's almost, it's the tentacles have reached far and wide into so many different aspects of government. And so, right from the outset, this was a top priority for the NPA. Not forgetting all of the other issues we need to deal with: sexual and gender-based violence, cybercrime, murders, all kinds of housebreakings, quality of life crimes. So all of that still needed to continue, very important work. But as I said before, notwithstanding incredibly good work that's happening in other parts of the NPA, and I can speak a lot about that, including with the Thuthuzela care centers. There's amazing work happening there. But I said the success of the NPA will be judged on its ability to hold state capturers to account
Yeah.
and to bring back the money. And so therefore that was a top priority for the NPA. And that is why even with the 6 months, we set the 6-month priority program, simply focusing on corruption and state capture in particular. And so now, as the cases are coming to court, after a lot of building and capacity and resourcing, it does feel like things are coming together. But as I said, we're not where we want to be. And there's still a lot of work. And I've said to colleagues, we cannot take what I've referred to our collective foot off the accelerator, because there's so much more to be done. You look at the Zondo Commission, it's a mountain to climb, but at least we're climbing and we're moving in the right direction. I've said we may take a few tumbles on the way up. That's to be expected, but hopefully it doesn't bring us right down. But I have such confidence in the resilience and in the commitment and dedication of people that are doing this work, that I'm really confident that even when that happens, we will pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and just keep moving up. Because for the country, we cannot afford not to do that.
The President made public his response to the State Capture Commission, to Zondo, and he made those key announcements. I had visions of you all celebrating in this building when he announced it, because he's made the investigating directorate permanent and he has given the ID investigative powers. How fundamental is that to the ID doing its work?
This is almost a game changer, let's put it that way. Giving the ID permanence has so many implications for fighting corruption in this country. The methodology of the multidisciplinary, or the troika principle, remember, of having prosecution-led investigations, and also working with analysts, is one of the good practices in terms of dealing with complex crimes. And so the ability to bring the various disciplines into a permanent entity is huge. One of the challenges of the ID was the lack of security of tenure and people sort of jumping ship. We get people in, but if there's a permanent position in somewhere else in government, whether in the other parts of the NPA or outside of the NPA, then they would rather take that because of the fact that the ID could just close down at any point. So the permanence is really, really an important issue. And so, the powers that you've mentioned are, that's also one of the challenges of the ID, is that they do not have what is traditionally known as police powers. And so the announcement by the President that the ID will be permanent and will have the necessary powers is huge. And then, of course, partnerships with other organizations, so with other entities that are critical. That ID is not an island. And I think learning from the experiences of the past, we need to ensure that the ID works extremely closely with our key partners, primarily the DPCI, and SAPs, the greatest SAPs generally, also the SIU, also the FIC, Financial Intelligence Center, also SARS. So it's critical that we understand that the ID works in this greater criminal justice system, and that we can only be successful if we work together with these key partners. That said, I want to caution that, again, the expectations are extreme, that things are tomorrow going to change. We certainly hope it won't take long. And we were anticipating that this could be the President's announcement. We didn't know, but we anticipated that it might be the case. And in anticipation, we were already preparing in the NPA for that eventuality. So we already, months ago, in fact, started trying to capacitate the ID as a permanent capacity, because we knew fighting corruption is not going to end in 5 years. No. It's going to go on for a long time. And so you need a permanent capacity, and we've had the minister's support in that process. And so, we've been doing that. But as I said, I want to respond to being cautious, because I want to return to that, because legislative change, doesn't happen overnight. And we certainly are, we're working with the Department of Justice, because they are responsible for the legislative changes. It's not the NPA, but we're certainly working with the DG and his team in terms of supporting them however we need to. But at the end of the day, it is their responsibility to ensure that the legislation moves quickly through the processes are expedited. And we are, of course, engaging with the minister to try to, I think he will certainly want to expedite that process. So whilst the broader legislative changes happen, we have also approached the minister to grant ID investigators what is referred to as peace officer powers in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act, which are very similar powers to what the police have. So that can be done by way of regulations by the minister. So we've sent that to the minister about 2 months ago, I think. So it's doing its rounds there and getting inputs, etc. There's also been consultation with the SAPs by the minister. And we're certainly hoping that very soon the minister will sign off on those regulations that will give the ID those powers. That is an important step in this process.
In a way, the ID is being described as the Scorpions 2.0 because of these changes. There were some fundamental learnings from the Scorpions, why the ANC decided to move against the Scorpions. The police felt that they were encroaching on their domain, the Hollywood-style tactics. Have you learnt, or has the NPA learnt from the experience of the Scorpions, and what will you ensure you'll do differently this time around?
Well, firstly, it's sort of the model is similar, but it's not the same. There's a very narrow, focused mandate on corruption with regard to the ID. Of course, there's been lots of lessons to be learned. And I think some of the key ones, and, as I said earlier, the ID is not an island. It works within a system. And the first thing is that we need to collaborate with our stakeholders. We need to ensure that there's clarity between the ID and, in particular, the DPCI in terms of what the mandate of the ID is and how we collaborate for success for the country. Because this is not about the ID. It's not about the DPCI or the SIU or SARS. It's about South Africa Incorporated. And in my view, it doesn't matter where the credit goes. So the Hollywood-style arrests and all of that, that is a thing of the past, and that's not going to be happening. This is an entity in the ID, in the NPA, that's simply going to go about doing its work, and our success will be in court, not out of court. We're not, it's going to be at the end of the day when people are held accountable for the crimes. And so I think the key learning is that we get on with our work. There's no drama around it. Collaboration. I cannot emphasize that. We have to work with our partners. And for now, we're working really well with our partners. The task force that was created, and even in the anti-corruption task team, which General Labia chairs, we have not just good relationships. Relationships are important because they help with partnership. They're critical, in fact. But we're trying to create mechanisms that force us to collaborate better so that it doesn't matter who the leaders are, that there must be systems and processes in place that ensure effective collaboration. So we're working on that as well.
So on collaboration, you've been working with the private sector really well. So we've seen Bowman's getting involved with Steinhoff, Worksman's with VBS. There are examples of the private sector getting involved. How's that been going? Has it been successful? There has been a little bit of criticism that it could impact your impartiality. Is that a fair criticism?
Firstly, private sector assisting government is not a new thing. That's what I don't understand. It's not a new thing. It's been not just government, but the NPA. Private sector has been involved in setting up the specialized commercial crime units. Years ago, business came on board because, they felt that, there wasn't sufficient attention being given to these types of so-called economic crimes. And so they were instrumental in setting up specialized commercial crime courts. Business has, and other partners have helped us in, other ways, like the Tutuzela care centers, where we work with other partners as well, Department of Health and other important partners also in the private sector, NGO sector. So it's not a new thing. But we recognize now that the playing field has changed, and those wanting to ensure that the NPA is not successful will try to find any reason to attack the NPA, in particular to say it's not acting independently, it's acting in a biased way, it's being captured by the private sector. That's completely understandable for people that do not want to face justice. But it's important for the NPA to ensure that we are not captured by the private sector, that we do our work, and that our decisions are taken independently. And so not just that and perceptions matter as well. So it's important that we deal with that issue. So we have been engaging with Business Leadership South Africa, with various other private sector organizations, in terms of trying particularly to assist with the resourcing and very specialized skills that the NPA needs in order to do its work. Mm-hmm. And so we've entered into an MOU with Business Leadership South Africa, and we are working in a way that enables us to work with BLSA, but not with individual companies or firms. But at the end of the day, we will be transparent about this. It will be reported in our annual reports. We are also, we're looking at some kind of donor oversight. So I think for us, as long as we can show in court that our decisions are independent, that we only act on the basis of the evidence that we have collected, that will demonstrate our independence. But I'm not surprised that the criticisms are there. They will come, but our work will speak for itself.
Do you anticipate some heavy fire coming your way now that the prosecutions are happening, that the NPA will become a target of criticism and smear campaigns and everything else that we've seen in the past?
Yeah, of course. I've said that before. I think the stakes are so high that those implicated would be sort of planning their strategies. And one of the strategies that we see is you don't defend the case in a court of law, you attack everything else in the hope that the case goes away at some point, and that you never get to the point where an accused person even pleads to the charges, So in addition to the Stalingrad tactics in court, which we are working very, very hard in terms of a strategy to deal with that, we anticipate that there will be attacks on the NPA, even on prosecutors in terms of, frivolous cases being brought against prosecutors. So the safety and the security of our prosecutors and witnesses is something we will not compromise. And we've also, in our budget, we've requested more money for security, for protection of witnesses. And these are really expensive. And it's hopefully the private sector will come on board and assist us with these kinds of, really, really expensive resources that the NPA needs. But I think fundamentally we have the commitment of the NPA is, I feel very confident that these kinds of attacks are not going to distract us from our work. And so, we will continue to do what we have to do.
You mentioned Stalingrad. People want to see convictions more than anything else. I think a lot of people will only be convinced by convictions rather than prosecutions. How do you deal with this, on the Stalingrad tactic and the ongoing postponements and interlocutory applications? How do you get through this?
Look, as prosecutors, all we can do is to ensure that our litigation strategies and our arguments in court are extremely strong, with all the necessary case law to support us, And that's all we can do, is make really strong arguments. The judiciary has an important role to play in this as well. And so I think that the granting of postponements for frivolous reasons has got to be something that the courts have to really think carefully about. So, we will do our part. And of course, there must be a fair trial. Accused persons are, it's their constitutional right. And as the NPA, we will support that because, if you don't have a fair process, then, rule of law means nothing. So it's really important that we have fair processes, that the accused are able to properly defend their matters in court. But where you have matters, delaying tactics that are brought in bad faith, it's important that the judiciary recognizes this and puts a stop to it. Otherwise, it's, the end of the day, I think that is going to be detrimental to the entire rule of law project in our country. But we will fight as hard as we can because, like the citizens in this country, we want people to be held accountable, and we want, the necessary consequences, whether it's imprisonment, whether it's asset recovery, that must happen. Otherwise, people will still think that we can delay and delay and delay, and at the end of the day, we will not be held accountable, and that cannot be in the interests of the country.
So you've mentioned optics and how it's so important around perceptions. The NPA has to prosecute without fear or favour. But of course, you always have to look at the political climate. We know from 2007, 2008, what happened with former President Jacob Zuma. You find yourself strangely, potentially in a similar position now with Ramaphosa around Phala Phala. Obviously, from your side, I imagine politics has nothing to do with the decision to prosecute.
Politics has nothing to do with the decision to prosecute. I want to make that very clear. But the reality is, we don't work in a bubble. We work in a highly politicized environment. So we need to hold the line on the rule of law and to ensure that our decisions are taken no matter who's at the end of the evidence. And so we also need to understand that the implications of our decision making, it has consequences. And so in as much as politics will not dictate our decision making, we need to manage decisions in a responsible way. And so we will always do that to ensure that the best interests of justice are served. But we will, think we've already been accused of being biased in some of our decisions. But that, as I said, it's not something that we don't expect. But our reputation, not just as the NPA, but as individual professionals, depends on our ability to ensure that we defend the rule of law at all costs, and that we seem to be doing that. And as the national director, I'm not prepared to compromise that for anyone. We have to hold that line.
So what can we expect from the NPA in the next year or so? Will we see convictions potentially? Will you get the Guptas back? I think that might be a key litmus test for the public.
So you'll certainly see a lot more cases coming to court, that I can assure you of. And you will, I am certainly hoping that we will also see convictions, because that is not, something that is completely in the hands of the NPA. We will do everything possible to ensure that cases move forward. But of course, there may be certain, plea bargains where we, accused persons, as it gets hotter, people may want to speak out and say, look, I'd rather just plead guilty and, get a sentence that might be something more tolerable. And so hopefully we will, move into those that area where we will see more people, as people feel the heat, decide to come forward and to speak to the NPA. And I would encourage people to do that. So, I certainly hope that in the next year we will see that kind of movement in terms of convictions, but also trials running their course, and, at the end of the day, people being held accountable, but asset recovery as well. I'm certainly we have a very ambitious asset recovery strategy. We are looking more at civil asset recovery as well, one that is not dependent on a conviction, which will take a long time. So we are pushing with a strategy for civil asset recovery so that we can really bring back the billions that have been taken.
You have 3 years left of your term, is that right?
Yeah.
Can you give us an assurance you'll be here to the end, and what do you hope to achieve by the end?
Absolutely. I mean, barring some vis major that may happen, we can't help that. But I have every intention of serving my term out. I mean, what better job is there in the world today? And I mean that sincerely. This is the most purposeful thing I have ever done in my life. And I will not give it up for anything. And so I'm really, the next 3 years, we're hoping that, we have a very ambitious 5-year strategy, which ends in 2 years. And I'm certainly hoping that we will have achieved a number of our strategic objectives. But no, I mean, really, I'm really hope to see that, at the end of these 3 years, we can sit back and say that we've really turned this country around together with the NPA can't do it alone, but that we have done our absolute best to contribute to the rebuilding of the country. So no, I have absolutely no intention of going anywhere. I love what I'm doing, and so why would I leave? This is my purpose in life.
The Midday Report,
With Mandy Wiener.
12 to 1 on 702.
702.